Welcome. This is Tracy with KOGmissions.com, and I'm here with my good friend Dawn over in the UK. And Dawn is an ex-Christadelphian and a wonderful lady. And welcome, Dawn.
Thank you.
So, Dawn, could you reread what your mom sent in those booklets about what Christadelphians are still believing today?
This booklet is called Understanding the Bible's Teaching, the Devil, Satan, and Demons. It's published by the Dawn Book Supply. That's the Dawn Christadelphians. What does a belief in a supernatural evil force imply? The crux of the matter is that it implies the need for an external force for wrongdoing to intervene and lead a person away from doing good. This implies that human beings are basically good, and that without that external temptation we would never do wrong. So I don't know where they get that idea that people believe that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that either, because we even see in the millennial reign, when Satan is bound for 1,000 years, people still choose to do what they do.
Yes, there's still the element of choice, isn't there? Nobody forces you to give in. This is what my brother was trying to argue with me when he was up here a couple of years ago. He said, if you're tempted by an external force like the devil, then that shifts the responsibility. You're not taking the responsibility for your own sin. And I said, well, actually no, because Adam and Eve were tempted by an external creature, and they were still held responsible for their sin and were punished for it. And he didn't know quite how to answer that.
It's still ultimately your choice. I mean, you think of peer pressure.
Yes.
If we go out with people and there are people saying, hey, Don and Tracy, let's go do this or that, which we know is wrong.
Yes.
We still have the choice to go along with it or not. And by our choice is what we're making, whether we are sinning or not. Just because they're telling us, let's go do this, that's not sin, and we're tempted.
No.
Like we see Jesus tempted in the wilderness.
Yes. Well, they also say here mankind has invented the devil as a convenient way of transferring the blame elsewhere.
Well, that's interesting, because the Garden of Eden, it started out by Adam blaming Eve and Eve blaming Satan.
Yes. So I don't know quite why they think that that's what other people believe. I think they're just ignorant about what other people do believe, to be honest. I don't think it's necessary that every time we're tempted by the devil himself. Isn't it James that says every man sins when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed? So at the end of the day, whether it comes from inside or outside, it's our own lust. If we give in to it,
right,
then we've chosen to do that, haven't we?
I would agree with that. We're tempted by, like it says, our own lusts and our own what we want. There are times that Satan may influence, but I don't know that that's the everyday thing.
A lot of the evil and wickedness, things that goes on in the world is either caused or promoted by him anyway, isn't it? So it could be indirectly.
Well, I think we see in Revelation where, like, the false prophet and Antichrist, that kingdom reign at that time of them, it says that they are actually, they're powered by Satan. There's something very satanic in that. Now, if we look at every country and every ruler, I wouldn't say every ruler, specific rulers, are chosen by God or empowered by Satan to do things. Some of them, people choose, and this person's just there, and God really doesn't care who it is. But if there's a purpose that God needs somebody in a place to make prophecy happen or whatever, he's going to choose and make those people get into that place no matter what. And on the same hand, Satan could, if he thinks for his benefit, by like Hitler, I think he was probably empowered by Satan in some way. Those are exceptions. I wouldn't say every evil person is empowered by Satan. It's like you said, their own evil desires.
Yes, I wouldn't have thought it was necessary in every case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sin really it's going your own way instead of God's way, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It isn't always what people might consider to be something bad. Selfishness can be sin if whenever you're faced with the choice of doing something for someone else or looking after number one, and you always look after number one instead.
Mm-hmm.
That's your own desires to please yourself. You don't need any temptation from anywhere else. But it's still sin, isn't it?
Well, look even at Adam and Eve. Eve was tempted by Satan. She could have still said no. Adam could have still said no, even when his wife was offering it to him.
Yes, they had the choice. Exactly. Just as Jesus did when he was tempted in the wilderness. And he was tempted by an external tempter as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we're told that Jesus was tempted in all points like as we are. So if he had this devil dwelling inside him, as the Christadelphians say, then why did he need an external devil as well?
Now, they wouldn't say that it was external. Was he just talking to himself, having a conversation? Or how was he being tempted? Just in his own thoughts? Or what do they typically say?
They quote from Luke 4, verses 1 to 3, Luke 5, I don't understand those references. Anyway, they've quoted the whole thing about Jesus being filled with the Holy Spirit and led by the Spirit into the wilderness. And then it says these verses imply an external agency promoting Jesus to sin against God. But we need to think a little more deeply about the details of this narrative. Jesus was in the wilderness, yet for one moment he is on a high mountain from which all the kingdoms of the world could be seen, and next he is on the pinnacle of the temple. Seeing all the kingdoms of the world is not possible even from the top of Mount Everest, let alone a mountain in Israel. Now their explanation is all these experiences played out in the mind of Jesus as he wrestled with the new powers that he had just received, powers he could use as God intended or abuse to satisfy his own interest. So these temptations would flood into his mind, but these, like all the others, had to be faced and overcome. In the wilderness, Jesus was struggling with the same evil tendencies that we struggle with. But you might ask, if the record of Jesus' temptation is indeed a description of his mental struggles about the proper use of his new God-given powers, why is it presented in such a way as to suggest that there was an external tempter? Then now they go into their old argument. The answer is that in the Bible, personification is often used to add emphasis to an abstract idea or concept. For example, in the book of Proverbs, the attribute of wisdom is likened to a woman, etc. And this is one of their standard explanations, which they always use.
I don't know that those two really go together, though.
The thing is, in the book of Proverbs, it's quite evident, self-evident, that wisdom and the woman are the same, one and the same. It sort of explains itself, doesn't it?
Right.
Whereas Jesus in the wilderness, we're not told who this devil was, where he came from. We're certainly not told that it was all in Jesus' imagination, that it was all played out in his mind. In fact, in one of the Gospels it says the devil left him until an opportune time after he'd finished tempting him.
Well, and
Well,
then
if
it
that
says he came up to him as well. Do your thoughts just
devil
come
was inside Jesus, how did he come to leave him?
up? Well, and then in Revelation, we see that it tells us the serpent in the garden, the devil, Satan, the beast, or the dragon, actually, are all Satan. I mean, it's all the same being. And then it tells us in Revelation 2 that the lake of fire is prepared for, the beast and the false prophet are thrown in there, but then later Satan is. So are the beast and the false prophet, the Antichrist, are they not real beings? And if they are real beings thrown into the lake of fire, how would it be any different than when it talks about the being of Satan?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
If the false prophet and the beast are real, then why isn't Satan as well?
Mm-hmm.
That's the one, isn't it? Revelation 20, verse 2.
Mm-hmm.
And he laid hold on the old dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. That's talking about the millennium, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why the millennium is going to be such a blessed age, because the devil won't be roaming around to cause any trouble during that time. Or are the Christadelphians saying that somehow the nature of ordinary people will be changed and they won't have this devil inside them all that time?
If you were going to use that argument, that would only be those who were resurrected as Christians or believers, and those who are changed that had immortality during the millennial reign. Those that are coming in out of the Great Tribulation or that are born throughout that time, they're not immortal.
They would still be mortal, won't they? Exactly,
Yes,
they have to have the same nature as everybody else
but
in
they
this
won't
life.
But they won't have the influence of the external pressure.
No.
And they're going to have the positive influence of us that will be teaching them and showing them the way to be.
And Jesus ruling from Jerusalem and the law, right. God's law going out throughout the whole world.
Well, and we see that when Satan is released after the millennium, it says he goes out to deceive again, and there are a lot of people that follow him. So all these armies from all over the world are still, these people are going to come together to come against Messiah.
Yes, that's right.
And at that point,
all because Satan has been released for a short time.
Well, and he's just organizing them. They already have that evil in them themselves, even without Satan being there, because they're willing to follow him.
Yes.
And
probably people who have been born during the millennium, and that state is all they've ever known, possibly.
Yeah, yes.
And to them, it's just normal, and they probably think, "Oh, we're fed up being ruled by this Jesus. We don't want to do what he says anymore. We want some change."
Well, because there's still pride. People can still have pride, and that's where a lot of that comes from, pride. But what's interesting, when Satan and these armies come against Jesus in Jerusalem at that time, they're struck down dead, but it says Satan is thrown in the lake of fire at that time.
Yes.
So they're killed when they'll be resurrected then shortly after at the white throne judgment to be judged according to what they've done. But at that point, the false prophet and Antichrist are already burned up in the lake of fire, and Satan then is thrown in. They're the first ones that are going in the fire. Well, and actually it says that the false prophet and Antichrist, doesn't it say they're thrown alive into the fire? Even so, there's more torture, there's more pain for them. Now, Christadelphians, they believe in angels, don't they? And heavenly beings of some other kind.
Yes. I'm just looking at Revelation 20. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up. Mm-hmm. Yes, Satan released from his prison, deceives the nations, gathers them together for battle against the camp of the saints, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devours them. The devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever.
Now, we know that people are not tormented forever and ever, and even with this, I don't think we can know for sure about about Satan, but I think he can be destroyed. People say, well, the angels can't die, but no, but they can be destroyed. And the beast and the false prophet, the Antichrist, they were human beings. So God would have to keep them alive. A lot of times they say that forever and ever is into the ages of ages.
Yes, so, I've heard that it doesn't necessarily mean for eternity.
Right. And so, does God allow them to stay alive so they're tortured from when they're thrown in throughout the 1,000 years? And to that, but in the end, it says in 1 Corinthians 15 that Jesus has to put an end to death, has to overcome all of that, which we see in the second resurrection and judgment. It says death and Hades is thrown into the lake of fire. So basically, that's the last time anybody's going to die. And so once that's burned up, we read, I don't remember if it was Isaiah or somewhere in the Old Testament, where it says that they walk on the ashes. So at some point, this fire is going to burn out, because can you imagine what kind of eternity, in the age to come that would be, as if this fire was going? I mean, that would bring you back memories of, people you knew that didn't make it into, the ages to come. I think it's more clear that this fire is going to burn up, most likely, at least all the people. In regards to Satan, we don't know for sure, but I think we just need to trust that God and Jesus know what they're doing. They're going to do the best thing, the fair thing, the right thing. And so whatever it is, it is. But we do need to know that people are not tormented or burning forever and ever in hell.
Oh, no. I don't believe that anyway. Because God says that he takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked.
Right. And he's not an evil God that's, like you said, taking pleasure in them, just suffering forever and ever.
Not only that, but if people are suffering forever, that presumably means that they have an immortal soul, which we don't believe in, do we?
And that's what they got from the Greeks, Plato and them, that there is this immortal soul. And so if it's either going to heaven or into hell, it's going to be there wherever, forever and ever. Not understanding.
But as for the devil, I mean, presumably he is immortal, isn't he? I mean, he's been living for a long time anyway.
But see, it doesn't say that they're immortal. Maybe they don't die like we do, but they can be destroyed.
No.
God could still destroy the devil, so he is no more, and the angels that are with him. Now,
he's obviously a spirit. He's obviously a spiritual being, isn't he? So different from us anyway. So probably his mode of death will have to be different.
Mm-hmm. But God can just choose to destroy it. I mean, I think if God spoke things into being, he can speak them out of being as well.
I would think so. I don't think we know enough about Satan really to be saying too much about him. I'm not convinced that those chapters in Isaiah and Ezekiel are talking about Satan. Really.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I don't know that they're talking about that. There just says that the righteous, they will walk on the ashes of the wicked. And so, I mean, this fire is going to burn up, and there's eventually going to be just ashes.
I meant those two prophecies, one about the king of, as a lamentation for the king of Tyre, and the other one for the king of Babylon.
Mm.
And the language is very poetical. And some people believe it's talking about Satan, but to me, I don't see it.
Mm.
But I think people have had ideas put into their minds about about that from other sources other than the Bible. And then when they look at these things, they see things that people who haven't had these ideas put into their mind don't see. Do you see what I mean? It's a bit like people having ideas about Trinity and then seeing all these places in the Bible where they think it's talking about the Trinity because they've already had these ideas planted in their minds.
Yeah, Revelation 19 is where it talks about the beast and false prophet, I think, being thrown in the lake of fire. So verse 19, then I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies assembled to do battle with the one who rode the horse and with his army. Now the beast was seized, along with them the false prophet who had performed the signs on his behalf, signs which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast, those who worshiped the image. Both of them were thrown alive into the lake of fire burning with sulfur. That's Revelation 19, verse 20. And then it says, the rest were killed by the sword that extended from the mouth of the one who rode the horse, and the birds gorged themselves with their flesh. So these armies are all killed probably by Jesus's word then that he speaks. And the birds come and they're eating all these dead people because they have to get rid of them somehow.
So Satan is put somewhere else than it looks like in chapter
At that
20.
time, he's put
into a bottomless pit and shut up with a seal over him.
A sort of prison.
So he's not thrown into the lake of fire until the end of the 1,000 years.
Right, because I think you read in chapter 20 where it says Satan was thrown in where the beast and the false prophet were thrown.
Yes, they're put there first, aren't they? Cast alive. So if they're put there alive at the beginning of the millennium, then 1,000 years later, presumably they're still there.
Well, we don't know. They were cast alive. We don't know if they were just cast alive. So, well, if you look at like Servetus, who Calvin killed by burning at the stake, and a lot of other believers, some of them suffered for hours. And it wasn't just like you had your head chopped off and you're dead. And I think those evil people are going to suffer longer for that. You know, they're not going to be instantly probably dead when they're thrown in.
No.
There's going to be a suffering for them. And that's probably the point that they're thrown alive, is letting us know that they will experience some suffering for what they did.
Well, when you think of all the wickedness and the terrible things that Satan has caused in this world, he deserves to suffer a bit longer, really, doesn't he?
And that's the thing too, like we were talking about before, where the Bible's silent. These are all philosophical conversations. You know, we like think, oh, Hitler's going to be, you know, that he's going to suffer more because he was awful. Well, maybe, we don't know for sure. You know, are people that are judged, is the second death, then they die and then they're thrown in the lake of fire. You know, so they're not really suffering, but they're just burned up. Because it doesn't say that at the white throne judgment, people are thrown alive into the lake of fire. So we don't know. But again, we need to know that Jesus is righteous. God is righteous. Like you said,
Yes.
God desired, you know, God doesn't take pleasure in the suffering of the wicked. So does that insinuate that those people are just killed again, you know, allowed to die, and then they're thrown in the lake of fire to get rid of them? Or are they actually thrown in alive? It doesn't really say. So could Jesus choose to say throw Hitler alive in too, or other people that were, you know, truly evil? I know there are other beliefs that they say everybody's resurrected and given life, and those that are really bad, like Hitler, they're just dead forever. Well, the Bible doesn't say that at all. You know?
No, because eternal life is something that's held out as a reward for the righteous, isn't it?
Well, and every knee has to bow. Everybody has to acknowledge that Jesus Christ is God's Messiah. And that's what those of us who do that now, we receive our reward and we're judged righteously when Jesus comes. That's why we're resurrected or changed and given immortality. And then the rest of the dead come to life after the millennium. And that's when they're judged according to what they've done. And that's where Jesus is going to have his righteous judgment.
Yes.
With them. You know, there's a different standard of judging at that point. You know, you look at aborted babies, they didn't do anything wrong. They should be resurrected and given life. But how is that going to work? We don't know. Do they just automatically get it? Is there a trial period? I mean, it doesn't say that in the Bible, so we don't know how long. Some people say that there's like a time period between, you know, the second resurrection and then when people are judged. The Bible doesn't say that. Could there be? Maybe. I don't know. But we don't know that.
No, we don't know that sort of thing, do we?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know how long this judgment will be for each person or how public it will be. I mean, imagine, you know, somebody like Hitler or someone who's led a wicked life being paraded in front of everyone. Imagine the shame of having Jesus, you know. But
see, it doesn't tell us that's going to be. So
I know. I'm not saying it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah.
But it might just not be an instant death. It might have to suffer shame and all the rest of it before they actually are killed.
Well, and the question is, who
of having all their sins paraded in front of everybody, perhaps.
Right. But the question is everybody resurrected at one time? And so there's this huge mass of people that are being judged? Or are they resurrected one at a time, you know, coming before Jesus?
That's another thing we don't really know, isn't it?
We don't know. I think the big thing is, though, we need to strive to live our lives and to share with other people the hope of the first resurrection when Jesus returns, because that's a guaranteed resurrection to immortality.
Yes.
And we want to be a part of that, and we want as many people to be a part of that. The second resurrection, you know, there's a 50-50 chance Jesus might judge you righteous, he might judge you wicked. You don't know. So there is hope. You know, the second resurrection isn't to just raise everybody and throw them all in the lake of fire like a lot of people have taught in the past.
No, because there'll be he's going to divide them like a sheep, you know, a shepherd divide the sheep from the goats, isn't he?
That's a whole nother discussion, because I haven't quite figured that out. Some people say that is before, when Jesus comes, that he does that with those that are still left.
All right.
So I'm not sure where I stand totally on that, but it seems like it could be at his return where he's judging. But on the other hand, how would he be judging to destruction? And so I haven't done enough study on that to have an opinion right now.
I must admit I've got grey areas too.
Mm-hmm. I think if we're all honest, we all do. And that's why we keep studying.
But blessed and holy are those who have part in the first resurrection. Over them the second death has no power.
Amen.
So, like you say, you know, that's something to aim for and teach other people about, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So I thank Dawn for joining me today, and hopefully we'll be able to talk again in the near future with her to hear more of her story and her journey to where she is today, and hear a little bit more about some of the different biblical teachings that challenged her and that she struggled through and studied and was looking to find answers in. And so thank you so much for joining us, and have a blessed day.